Britain, France and Germany have issued a joint statement urging clarification over the death of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, saying the Saudi side of the story needs to be backed up with facts. Well, last night, the Saudi foreign minister said Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman knew nothing of the attack and that it was a rogue operation that killed Khashoggi in the consulate in Istanbul more than 2 weeks ago. Meanwhile, Turkey's President Erdogan has said that he will reveal the naked truth about what happened tomorrow. Richard Good reports.
New CCTV footage shows Jamal Khashoggi's final goodbye to his Turkish fiancée Hatice Cengiz. With each new day, the Saudi version of what happened to the journalist inside the consulate in Istanbul appears to be changing. Now, for the first time, the Saudi foreign minister says the killing was criminal.
There obviously was a tremendous mistake made, and what compounded the mistake was the attempt to try to cover up. That is unacceptable in any government. These things unfortunately happen. We want to make sure that those who are responsible are punished.
As the international pressure mounts, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has reportedly telephoned Khashoggi's son to express condolences over the killing, and 5 intelligence officials have been sacked. But for many in the international community, the Saudi response has been insufficient. Angela Merkel called on Sunday for sanctions to be introduced. Arms exports cannot take place in the current situation in which we find ourselves, she told a press conference in Switzerland. Meanwhile, Khashoggi's fiancée is now under 24-hour police protection. After Saudi Arabia confirmed his death, she tweeted, "They have taken your body from this world, but your beautiful smile will stay in my world forever." Richard Good, Euronews.
Well, let's take a more of a closer look at the European response to those developments. And to do that, we can go live to Annelise Borges, who's in Paris for us. Good morning to you, Annelise. What more can you tell us about the European response thus far?
Good morning, Belle. Well, EU countries want the facts after 2 weeks of inconsistent statements that started with the assertion that Jamal Khashoggi had left that consulate unharmed. Now EU leaders are struggling to believe in the Saudis' explanation that the journalist has actually died as a result of a fist fight inside that consulate. The strongest words coming from Germany. We've heard there from the German Chancellor Angela Merkel saying that under the current circumstances, the exports of weapons cannot continue. Of course, other EU countries have not gone that far, at least not yet. But they're all talking about the need for clarification as to what happened to Jamal Khashoggi. The UK Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt saying that it is very important to determine the truth, that the explanation provided by the Saudis is not exactly credible, and that nothing can justify this killing. France's Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian also spoke about the case, saying that France will demand an exhaustive and diligent investigation into this case, and that determining who's responsible and making sure that those responsible face justice for their actions is paramount for the stability of the relationship between Paris and Riyadh, a relationship that Le Drian described as based on frankness and transparency. For now, though, all EU countries saying that they are going to wait for the findings of the Turkish investigation before determining what kind of punishment, if any, they will impose on Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia, for its part, has arrested numerous officials connected with this case. What does that suggest to us?
Well, indeed, Saudi Arabia on Friday announced that it had 18 suspects under detention and that it had fired a couple of senior officials. 5 top officials in Riyadh are now without a job. They are assumingly have some kind of connection with this case. Among these top officials is Ahmed al-Asiri, a top military official, the top intelligence official in Riyadh, a former spokesperson for the Arab coalition fighting in Yemen, a high-ranking official, someone with close ties with the Saudi royal family. Back in March, he came to Paris to prepare for Mohammed bin Salman's visit here in France, and I had a chance to sit down and speak to him about the war in Yemen, about Saudi Arabia's role in the region, but also about Riyadh's push for reform in the kingdom. This is what Ahmed al-Asiri had to say. Your 2030 vision includes reforms that involve also women, the relationship that Saudi Arabia has with Islam. What about social rights? What about, because driving is of course important, but what about other rights, including freedom of expression, freedom of speech? If somebody doesn't agree with the Saudi Arabia government today, can they say so? Will they be able to say so in 2030?
Well, I think, as you mentioned, there is a lot of things to do. We cannot do everything at the same time. And to modernize, to reform a society, you need to go gradually. A very quick changement will cause a very quick negative sides. We reform all those what you mentioned, and to see first where is the reference in the religion, then what is the reaction of the society to those kind of a changement. Those what you mentioned is a small things, but it shows the intention of His Majesty the King and his government to change gradually toward an objective.
Ahmed al-Asiri speaking about the importance of change, but that Saudi Arabia could not do everything at once. There's been a lot of talk about this push for reform in Saudi Arabia. Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince, has attempted to show a more progressive vision for the country. However, though, if it's proven that Saudi Arabia and top officials in Riyadh were indeed behind the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, well, it will show that the vision for Saudi Arabia was nowhere near as progressive as the West was made to believe, Bill.
Annelise, thank you very much. Annelise Borges there in Paris. Well, let's get some more on from the Turkish side of this investigation. To do that, I'm joined by journalist Christina Jovanovski. She's in Istanbul. Good morning, Christina. Overnight, we saw President Erdogan speaking to US President Donald Trump. What came out of that?
Well, according to the Turkish government, they had agreed that the facts of the case needed to be cleared. They had also said that they wanted to improve cooperation between Turkey and the U.S. This is important in light of the fact that the two sides had been at a very low point in their relationship over the summer due to the detention of an American, and the fact that their cooperation is improving will be crucial in this investigation. We had also heard from President Erdogan that the truth would be revealed from him in a speech in Parliament tomorrow. So we don't know what will happen then. Will he continue to blame Saudi Arabia, demand more facts from Saudi Arabia? Is there going to be more evidence that he's going to provide? And again, crucially, the real question here, one of the big questions here, is what role did the Saudi Crown Prince play? Will Turkey insist that he played a crucial part in the death of this journalist, and if so, that will be a big threat to the relationships between Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and the U.S.
And Christina, a huge amount has happened over the weekend. Can you just bring us up to date with where we are with that investigation now?
Well, we're getting a lot of different narratives from the Saudi side of what had happened. They have now admitted that he died. One new narrative is from the Reuters news agency, citing a Saudi official who claims that the plan was to abduct Khashoggi, that then he resisted, and then the people in the consulate put him in a chokehold, and he died, and that wasn't planned, that they had, according to the Saudi official, overstepped what the plan was. And then, according to the Saudi official in this report, that the body was put into a rug and that his belongings were discarded in another district in the city. Crucially, again, the point is, what role did the Saudi Crown Prince play? If this story was believed, then that would mean that the Saudi Crown Prince, effectively the leader of Saudi Arabia, was planning on killing this journalist. If everyone accepted that idea, accepted that narrative, that would help Saudi Arabia get out of this crisis. Certainly, some people are not going to. Friends of Khashoggi's that I had spoke to earlier had said that Khashoggi thought that the Crown Prince was dangerous, that he was scared of Saudi Arabia after he came into power. So there'll be a lot of questions about this new narrative.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Christina Jovanovski in Istanbul there. Theresa May will tell British Parliament today that 95% of the Brexit deal is done, as rumours mount of a rebellion against her plan by pro-Brexit Conservative MPs. With the possibility of a no-confidence vote looming, Prime Minister May will promise the House of Commons today that some of Brexit's main sticking points have been solved. Brexit Secretary Dominic Raab used a British TV appearance on Sunday to urge Conservative MPs to play for the team, while also admitting that they had just weeks to find solutions. On Saturday, hundreds of thousands of EU supporters marched through London calling for another vote, this time on the final deal. Well, joining us live now from Westminster is Vincent McAviney to take a look at all the weekend's movements. Good morning, Vincent. Where is this speculation of a no-confidence vote coming from?
Good morning, Belle. Well, for weeks now, we've heard that the letters of no confidence, which trigger a leadership race in a Conservative Party, have been mounting. They go to the party's 1922 committee chairman. Once he gets to the threshold, which is 48, he then has to announce that this no confidence motion has passed and that a leadership election takes place. Now, in the party conference season, we heard that the toll was around 38. It's not publicly announced, but it was rumoured to be about 38, with one no confidence letter even going in just before the Prime Minister's speech. But over the weekend, reports have come out in the Sunday newspapers that the toll is now sitting at around 46 letters, so just 2 away from triggering that leadership race. Now, to replace Theresa May, the successful candidate would actually have to get around 158 MPs behind him or her. So at the moment it's unclear where exactly the Prime Minister sits, but she's going to have to come back here today to the House of Commons to make that speech in which she'll say, as you mentioned, 95% of the deal is done. There's new protocols agreed on Cyprus and Gibraltar to look like that she did get some headway last week, but she's facing the backbenchers laying down a possible amendment today to be voted on that the Prime Minister would sort of then be deadlocked into when it comes to Northern Ireland, that the Northern Ireland Assembly, which currently isn't sitting and hasn't been for over 18 months, would have to vote on whatever it is that the Northern Ireland settlement is on the backstop, something that would kind of bind her. And she's also going to have to appear before that backbench 1922 committee on Wednesday in what's being branded a show trial. And one unnamed MP over the weekend said that she needs to bring her own noose to that. This is the level of rhetoric now being pointed at this Prime Minister.
Well, you sort of touched on it there, but I mean, crucially, how much cross-party support does May have for her Brexit plans?
Well, you mentioned that around 700,000 people actually marched through these streets in London showing their support for a second referendum over the weekend, and some Labour MPs took part in that march. Some Conservative MPs did, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. But interestingly, the Labour front bench, Jeremy Corbyn and his team, didn't march and didn't mention it on their social media over the whole weekend, even though Jeremy Corbyn has always been a fan of a big march, and that was the second biggest one since the Iraq War march. So it's interesting that the Labour leadership seem to be ignoring that, and they have said that if the tests that they have set forth are passed, they will vote it through. And there are splinter groups now, some MPs like Caroline Flint, a Labour MP last week, saying we've just got to get through whatever the Prime Minister can get us for the sake of the nation. So there is some cross-party support, but things here are getting really fractured and really heated.
All right, thank you, Vincent. And we should remind viewers as well, of course, that that second vote Vincent talked about would be a vote on a final deal and not on Brexit itself. Moscow is calling it a very dangerous move that undermines nuclear disarmament efforts. Senior Russian officials have slammed US President Donald Trump's decision to withdraw from a landmark arms control treaty. Trump says the US will pull out because Russia is violating the Cold War-era pact, something Moscow denies, as Philip Churn reports.
Supporters say it sends a strong message to Russia. Critics say it tears up a 30-year-old peace agreement. President Trump's plan to pull out of the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty has been condemned by several world leaders, but Trump said he had good reason to do it.
Russia has violated the agreement. They've been violating it for many years, and I don't know why President Obama didn't negotiate or pull out. And we're not going to let them violate a nuclear agreement and go out and do weapons, and we're not allowed to.
The INF, signed in 1987, banned all ground-launched medium-range missiles with a range of between 500 and 5,500 kilometers. Germany was quick to criticize the decision and urged the US to think carefully about the effects on Europe and the rest of the world. Russia's President Putin said he'd want an explanation from US National Security Advisor John Bolton, who's currently in Moscow. Among those most disappointed by the move is the former Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev, who signed the treaty.
I think that the most comprehensive opinion about the US exit from the treaty, which I share totally, was expressed by President Putin.
He added that it was a reversal of efforts to achieve nuclear disarmament. But President Trump's statement will not come as a surprise to President Putin, who last December warned that the US was trying to undermine the agreement.
When it comes to Europe, we're talking about offensive infrastructure being created there. And we're talking about the violation from the US side of the articles of the 1987 Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty.
Russia denies violating the treaty, which was the first ever arms control agreement to eliminate an entire class of missiles. Philip Cherm, Euronews.